And we're back. Okay, so picking up where we left off here, talking about Freyr, this god of survival. Married originally to his twin sister, okay, which, as much as there's going to be like corruption and things like that in this mythology, incest isn't actually as big of a part of this as it was in Greek and Roman. And so when he gets traded over to the Assyria, they actually are not okay with this. Like they're great with just killing people in cold blood, but incest not all right. So if they go to him and say, "Listen, you're going to have to divorce your wife, sister," that's just not all right. That's disgusting. Okay, so he and his wife separate. So he's no longer married to Freya at that point. And this actually leads to a big part of the Freyr myth. Okay, because losing his wife's sister was a kind of a devastating thing. Okay, they continue to be friends or whatever, but like he didn't have that relationship, so he sort of pined his lost love and went looking for someone else. Now Freya is pursued by all kinds of people all the time, but Freya really never found that replacement. Okay, and so one day he's like up on his tower looking over the nine realms, mourning the loss of his love, and he sees this beautiful giantess princess named Princess Gerd. And that is not a name that you're ever going to forget. Like, I'm not sure why Disney hasn't picked up on Princess Gerd yet, but it's a beautiful, beautiful princess name. So he sees this beautiful Princess Gerd, is instantly and madly in love, though they've never actually had a conversation before in their life. And he decides he wants to marry her, but he can't because she's a frost giant and they're currently in the midst of his eternal massive war against the frost giants, and he knows there's no possible way a princess of the frost giants is ever going to marry him. And so his pining just like intensifies. He like doesn't come down for supper. He's not feasting, which is a big deal. Like feast in the Norse culture was like a massive part of their society. He never shows up, and people get suspicious. So his servant comes up to see what's going on. And he finds, I don't know, maybe Freyr like laying in the fetal position, crying or something like that. He's like, Freyr, what's wrong? He's like, Gerd, I need Gerd. And like, obviously there's some confusion at that point. And after, mumbling through the explanation, he finds out that he really has the hots for this girl, but just doesn't feel like he can follow through. At which point the servant says, hey, have you thought about just asking if she wants to, marry you? And Freyr had not. All right. And so Freyr sends him and says, okay, go find out what's up. And so his servant then travels to the land of the frost giants, goes into the king's house and says, listen, my lord Freyr, the great Norse war hero and god of survival, wants to marry your daughter Gerd. What do you think? And the guy immediately is like, well, the giant brother's immediately like, well, no, that's not going to work, because in order for him to marry my daughter, he would have to give up something of equal worth to him. My daughter is everything to me, and if he's not willing to sacrifice, which he won't be because he's a god and he hates us, then no, this isn't going to happen. And so the messenger servant goes back to Freyr and says, hey, listen, there's actually a possibility here. But if you're going to marry her, you have to be willing to give up something of equal importance. And he doesn't think you're going to be able to do that. Well, Freyr immediately jumps on this and says, of course I will. I have to have Gerd. And so he goes to the king and says, I will give up this, my sword. Remember, his sword that fights for itself, right? This is the symbol of his survival. Okay, this is what has made him so prosperous. So in that culture, he is giving up basically his life in order to marry this woman. So they see that as equal: a sword, a woman. I'm sorry, that's just the way that they saw it. And so he is allowed to marry Princess Gerd. They're very happy, everything's great, but he doesn't have his sword anymore. Remember, this is all moving towards Ragnarok happening. And so during Ragnarok, he doesn't have his weapon, okay? And so it actually says that he fights the entire battle with a stag antler, so the antler of a deer. Now, why he couldn't have just, like, I don't know, picked up another weapon, like an actual sword, or had the dwarfs make him something, I don't know. But for whatever reason, he just grabs himself an antler and, like, goes to town. He does really well. Like, it even points out that not only does he slay many, like, large giants, but one in particular whose name was Belly, which is a great large giant name. He kills Belly with his antler, but eventually he comes face to face with Surt, okay, like the king of the fire giants. They fight. All he has is that stag antler, and it's just not enough. And so he ends up dying in that battle, all because of the love of Gerd. Okay, and so that's a kind of the picture of Freyr there. So this is what he looks like, I guess. So that's him and his antler. I guess I'm gonna project this real quick and see that way you can actually see all the pictures moving through. I think my face is gonna disappear though, which you will probably appreciate. It's coming. Wait for it. There it is. Okay. Yeah, so that's um Freyr with maybe like a little mustache thing going on here. And then that's maybe a small version of a stag antler. Okay. So then next person we need to talk about is Freya, which interestingly is where we get Friday from, like day of the week Friday. Most of our days of the week are actually named after Norse gods. I'm not sure if you knew that or not. And so Freya is his twin sister, and she is like the Norse goddess to a T. Okay, she's the goddess of love and beauty and fertility. She hangs out with elves. She loves music and springtime and all things flowers and lovely. But she's also the goddess of war and death. So like half of the dead bodies that are slain in battle are given up as sacrifices to her. Okay, so definitely this contrast of the beautiful and the macabre together, that is Norse mythology. Like you have these cute little adorable squirrels that want to destroy everything, and you have these beautiful kind of like Aphrodite goddesses who are responsible for death and destruction as well. So do you have that contrast for sure? I'm not going to tell a lot of stories about Freya. You'll probably come across them in your hero presentations for sure. But a lot of her stories, she becomes like this goddess of sexuality. Like that's a big part of her person, and so she plays a side role in several stories. But most of the stories involve like her infidelity and things like that. And I'm not really going to get into that right now. What I do find really fascinating about her, though, is that she has a cat drawn chariot. Okay, flying cat drawn chariot, not like lions or tigers, but a giant domesticated set of cats that pull her chariot. So you can kind of see like here, okay. I mean, those are just giant flying cats. Same thing kind of here. This is her and her brother. I'm not sure if it's like pre or post marriage there. I mean, they look kind of like intimate, but we're gonna assume that they're just friends, okay? Like taking this little stroll. He's got his flying pig. She's got her flying cats. And then somewhere in I think it's Denmark, this happens, okay, which is phenomenal, right? So they have these massive cat floats that like parade downtown with Freya and I guess her little minion driving them, which is phenomenal. Like I've been talking to people from student council for years saying we have to make a mythology themed homecoming at some point so that this can happen in Farmington. Okay. Just think about it. Change your life. All right. Other guy we want to talk about is Cavseer. That's the spit guy, right? And I've already kind of walked you through where he came from. He's half a seer, half a near, because they spit into a pot, out he pops, okay? But he actually is known as the wisest of all the gods, maybe Balder being second in that list, okay? So with Cavseer, when he comes out, he becomes a veneer, but he's really never around because he's just so incredibly wise that he spends his time spreading the wealth, okay? Like going around sharing his wisdom with others. And that wisdom takes the form of poetry. Like poetry isn't just like rhyming words or things like that, especially to the Norse people. It was a way of communicating truth, okay? And so he would go around and he would dispel this wisdom wherever he would go, and people loved it, right? But some people got really jealous of his wisdom, particularly a set of dwarves. And they call Cavseer in and say, we need you to teach us your wisdom. And so he's like, yeah, absolutely, I'll share what I know. And so he tells them all of these poems, like, no, it's not the same. Like, we want to be able to do what you do. We want to be that wise. And he's like, I'm not sure how we would do that, but I'll share what I can. Like, no, we know how to do it. And they like ambush him and they kill him. Okay. And then they take his blood, because this is how Norse stuff works, and they drain it into a mead where they mix it with honey and they create what they call the mead of poetry from his blood. Okay. And so anyone who drinks that mead gets the gift of poetry. Well, word gets around that these dwarves are super wise and no one knows where Cavseer is. So Odin steps in to take this back, but he doesn't do it because he cares about Cavseer. He does it because he wants the wisdom for himself. So he goes in as an eagle, kills all the dwarves, steals this mead, and drinks it, because that's how Odin lives his life. I think I'm stopping right now.